Speaking of, now, if Israel, James, was expecting thanks for killing one of the world's worst terrorists, they would have been sorely disappointed. Israel, of course, as we mentioned, assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in a targeted rocket strike on Beirut on Saturday.
This week, we reached the conclusion that the devastating blows leveled at Hezbollah by the IDF will not be enough. The elimination of Nasrallah is a necessary condition for the fulfillment of our goals, sending back the Israelis who live near the northern border to their homes and bringing to an equilibrium in the region for decades.
Now, Nasrallah was a brutal terrorist leader who killed scores of Americans, Israelis and innocent civilians right across the Middle East in terror attacks, including on a US embassy dating back to the 1980s. But you wouldn't know that if you read The Washington Post, who described him as a saviour and a fatherly figure with a folksy yet articulate manner.
And not to be outdone, the New York Times described him as a charismatic religious and political leader and military strategist who had dedicated his life to resistance.
And Associated Press, well, they called him a charismatic and shrewd strategist, wearing spectacles and sporting a bushy grey beard like many religious Shiite men. In fact, he often paused in his speeches to make jokes.
Isn't that just absolutely appalling?
Wow.
That is so bad by mainstream media, bear in mind. I mean, I've become not surprised by this. You look what happened to the BBC, for example, in the UK. They actually were found to have breached their own editorial guidelines when it came to reporting on the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Did you say the BBC have editorial guidelines?
Who would have thought? What an absolute revelation. But how morally bankrupt do you have to be as an organisation, not just journalists here, but the editors of those publications, to celebrate a person who is a mass murderer, a man with no moral compass, and celebrating him as a light that he often made speeches and a couple of jokes, a real giggler, a funny bloke, but, you know, a casual murder here and there on the side. But no, it doesn't matter. It's disgusting.
Well, welcome to 2024, where the Western media call men who believe they're women. They call abortion family planning, and they call terrorist butchers fatherly figures who kind of have a folksy way and like to tell jokes when not slaughtering people right across the world. Ideas have consequences. And for mainstream media to be unable to call a spade, and when they start calling evil good and start romanticising it, I tell you what, they don't just make fools of themselves, but they endanger us all. Yeah. And we're starting to see the results of that around the Western world.
I completely agree. And even another example was the other day when Benjamin Netanyahu, he gave a speech to the UN, and he was saying to the representatives, the world representatives, we want Hamas to release the hostages. It was a very impassioned speech. Some of the representatives, James, they got up and they walked out. They walked out. Half of the room left, which was so rude. But then I was looking at some of the media articles saying, oh, it was just a mass protest against Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, how about the hostages? Again, it comes back down to those hostages, and that is where the line has been completely lost in this whole narrative.
I watched that Benjamin Netanyahu speech at the United Nations, and I noted how half the room walked out, which was an absolute disgrace. Benjamin Netanyahu didn't seem too thrown by that, and now we know why, because part of the strategy of having Netanyahu give that address at the UN was to give comfort to Hezbollah to believe that nothing was going to happen at that time. Benjamin Netanyahu is in New York. Little did they know, moments after he finished that speech, the Israelis assassinated the Hezbollah leader. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, the Israelis got what they wanted, and everyone else can... I was going to say go to hell. Can I say that?
I think you can. In this case, absolutely. Yeah, no sympathy there.